Thanks so much, Mike, and welcome everybody. We're really pleased that you're joining us this afternoon for our masterclass on operational excellence for consensus decision-making in hybrid environments. We changed the title a little bit to really reflect the focus, and certainly it's an area that Alliance managers must be excellent in. So let me talk a little bit about what we hope to achieve today. We want to develop an appreciation for the meaning of operational excellence for Alliance management and consider the implications of this hybrid environment that we're in now for delivering excellence. It really does change the name of the game. In fact, there was an article in the Washington Post today that talked about how people are really struggling with having meetings and interacting in this environment. We'll explore and apply techniques for planning and structuring consensus decision-making. And then during our breakout sessions, we'll have the opportunity to learn from each other. So we'll give a presentation for about 35 minutes or so, and then you'll go into breakout sessions where you will analyze the case study. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to take a read at that, and then we'll come back together and do a debrief. And so we're recording this part of the presentation, but your breakout sessions and the debrief won't, but we will be capturing them on a Jamboard. So the case study is fictional, but it could be very real, and it could be something that you've actually experienced. It's a co-development, co-commercialization alliance between two mature biopharmaceutical companies. Companies must make a decision on their development strategy, conducting their meetings in a hybrid environment, and they're making their decisions via consensus. So Jeff, why don't you give us a little setup here?
As Jan said, let's start with a baseline and get everybody on the same page. And one of the issues that we always hear talked about, the value of alliance management. And we look at it very simply as preventing the inherent inefficiencies in alliances from overtaking the intended value of a partnership. It's that simple, and at the same time, it's that challenging, because inevitably, as we all know, there are obstacles that develop that get in the way. And they could be with understaffing or inability to have effective communication. What we see happening is workloads leading to reactiveness. You can't be proactive. You have so many things on your plate, you're reactive. In many partnerships, therefore, since you have more relationships to be managed in the company than you have alliance folks capable of managing them, there are many that are not professionally managed at all. And oftentimes we get a lack of understanding of the work of alliance managers. And so these are three obstacles that we deal with. But when we start to look at it, well, how do really truly successful alliance professionals overcome some of these obstacles? And we see that really by following 7 key habits. 1, you want to enhance the value and manage risk. You want to manage and enable your stakeholders. You're trying to bridge the differences between the entities involved in the alliance. You need to gain and interpret insights. Obviously, there are issues that have to be resolved. You need to build operational excellence, which is really one of the areas of focus in this presentation today. And clearly, you have to publish your work so that folks inside the organization, the stakeholders and other employees in the organization really understand the value in the work of alliance management. So if we look at that, then before we talking about this whole question of alliances and excellence, what comes to mind when you talk about operational excellence for alliance management? What are some of the things that come to mind? So what we're going to do is a word cloud exercise where you'll go to www.menti.com. And you'll enter the code, as you see on the screen, 39727550. So whether it's on the phone or a computer, menti.com, and the code 39727550. So what words come to mind when you think about operational excellence for alliance management? And so we'll take a couple of minutes to populate that word cloud, and then we'll come back and continue. So interesting. We had a very large list of words come up when people think about operational excellence. And that's why the reason for this talk is we really want to kind of zero on as to how we really see it. But let's start with a little story that I like to call Learn How to Cut Glass. Several years ago, my wife and I had bought 3 prints and we wanted to have them framed. And so we looked at online, we found a glass cutter because we knew we had unusual sizes that we wanted cut. You couldn't buy a standard piece of glass for it. So we found the shop and we drove over there and we walked in with our 3 prints, and we get the woman behind the counter, we gave her the 3 prints. She said, well, just hang loose. I'm going to be around 15 minutes and I'll come back with the cuts. Well, about 2 minutes after she went into the back room, we heard glass breaking. Then we went quiet. Then we heard another piece of glass break, and another piece, and then another piece. And finally, after about 25 minutes, the woman comes out carrying actually 3 pieces of glass, which we were surprised to see. And she says, I got to tell you, cutting glass is very hard to do. And I said, I know, but you're in the business. That's what you do. That has to be your area of competency. You really need to learn how to cut glass. Well, if you think about alliance managers, operational excellence is really what you guys do. You have to help your organization achieve operational excellence, and you're doing that increasingly in hybrid environments. Let's define very precisely what we mean by operational excellence. It's delivering leading performance across all measures of value by consistently executing the fundamentals of alliance management a little bit better every day. And that's really, if you will, the key part of it. It's just not try to get everything done right away in one big project. You want to plan what you're going to do it very purposely, but try to improve your performance in whatever area you focus on just a little bit every day and get better and better and better. One of the first things you have to do in order to do that, you have to prioritize operational excellence in alliance management. But I think that it's really important to stress, as you can see here, excellence is not a skill. We view it as an attitude, a mindset. It's a way you think about things. So therefore, operational excellence in alliance management requires, we've identified 6 of the major things that are required: building a top-notch alliance management team, operating proactively, not reactively, adopting a portfolio perspective, really understand the breadth of the portfolio, not only you, but the whole alliance function in your organization deals with. You want to enable the stakeholders and partners to be successful. It's all about win-win-win, including the patients ultimately. Efficiency, effectiveness, and innovation are core responsibilities of alliance management to really help drive. And today, as again, we've said, you're managing in a hybrid environment. Just so we really understand the implications of that hybrid environment, Jan, why don't you share some insights on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeff. The reality is that hybrid meetings aren't new. We've been really running them for some time. You can think about the Polycom with 1 or 2 people on the other end, where it was very hard to keep remembering to bring them into the meeting. But what is new is managing the transition from everyone working on their individual devices to having some people together, others online, and then using some of the collaboration tools in order to be able to communicate with folks. So a hybrid meeting is any combination of remote and in-person groupings. And the number of combinations are infinite. The idea is that not everybody is in the same environment, so you have to be particularly mindful of how you engage and how you connect. And these hybrid meetings emphasize some of the challenges that are present in many meeting formats. Right? I mean, there are still power imbalances because it can be so easy to focus on the people that are physically together and forgetting about those that are remote. There's many logistical and technical complications. The technology is not as easy or as reliable as people would like to think. And, the cost of the emotional labor, really staying engaged across a screen all day long, is very tiring. So Zoom fatigue is indeed real. But hybrid meetings also bring some benefits that you don't get in face-to-face. First of all, it's easier to be inclusive because you don't have to pay for the travel, the time of travel. It's just much easier to have more people engaged in the meeting. And you're able to have rich media. You can use different ways of connecting and communicating information. So you're able to communicate with folks in a medium that they're more comfortable with. You know, they allow them to learn in their chosen environment. And we would have said, and we thought initially, that hybrid meetings would really bring about the end of multitasking because, you know, people can see what you're doing. But what we've been hearing lately is that's not the case, that people are indeed still multitasking through these particular meetings. When we look at some of the characteristics of in-person meetings compared to hybrid, we can really see some of the differences. But one of the things that's critical for hybrid meetings is that your participants have responsibilities. They are not passive listeners. They need to be engaged. And one of the tools that you want to use is a team agreement, similar to a team charter, where the team says, yes, these are the rules, the guidelines by which we are going to engage in these meetings. And now, when we take a look at some of the characteristics, you know, when you have an in-person meeting, the nonverbal clues are easy to see and reactions are very visible. In a hybrid situation, it takes a much greater effort on the part of the facilitator to really take the pulse of folks and to understand, you know, really the temperature in the room. In person, it's easy for personalities to dominate. It still can be the case in a hybrid situation, but the technology allows the facilitator better control of who is speaking. You can use things like chat to send somebody a note that says, hey, we really need to move on in the conversation if they're dominating. And if you're really brave, perhaps you even go to mute them and, you know, so you can move on to somebody else. In person, those side conversations can be disruptive. But online, they can be additive and occur in the chat. So it's just another channel of communication. For our in-person meetings, travel is almost always required for governance meetings, and that eliminates your time zones. For hybrid, we don't have to travel, but the time zones really must be accommodated. So we're getting lots more late night and early morning meetings for some folks. In person, you know, meetings fill the time allowed. If you've got a half-day meeting scheduled, it's going to take a half a day. In the hybrid environment, people are really trying to have shorter, more frequent, and focused meetings. In person, we typically have a social component for relationship building. In the hybrid world, there's a tendency to just do the meeting and move on to the next one. You're scheduled back to back. In person, we have spontaneous one-on-one conversations on breaks, which really can be very beneficial for relationship building and solving quick little problems. In the hybrid world, we've got to schedule them in order to get that connection. We don't have the meeting at the water cooler any longer. So it's really important that you create the right hybrid environment for your governance meeting. It's really essential to enable effective decision-making. And there's three major things that you need to think about. You need to think about the meeting where folks are functioning as a team. And you want to make sure you have disciplined preparation and get the meeting basics right. Thinking as a team means that you're fostering interaction based on trust. And as a team, you get aligned on the issues that you want to discuss at the meeting. And you've got the right people there based on the current focus of the work. In terms of preparation, yes, of course, you have your pre-meeting where you're trying to gain alignment, but not rigidity. You want to make sure that you're not falling victim to the conviction curve and that you have flexibility to be able to come up with solutions in the course of the meeting. Your pre-reads become very important. They need to be complete. They need to really provide the background that's necessary and the data that's necessary for people to debate, discuss, and decide. And make sure that you have a focused agenda with the desired outcomes really specified. The meeting basics, technology, facilitation, participation, you've got to work really hard to make sure that you get all of these right. And of course, you want to ensure proper follow-up and follow-through after the meeting. Now, one of the things about biopharma alliances is they almost always try to achieve consensus, even if one of the partners actually has the decision right. And consensus is something that can be confused sometimes. It's often thought that it means everybody agrees, but it's not. It's general agreement about something, an idea or opinion that's shared by all the people in a group. And there's levels of consensus. It can be unqualified, yes, or it can be an acceptance of the decision, or I can live with the decision. And finally, somebody says, I don't really agree, but I'm not going to block you, and I will support it. And if you have people that fall into that category, you want to make sure that you really understand what their objections are, and you're gathering data to be able to either convince them to be more supportive or to understand that perhaps they were right to begin with. So there's pros and cons to consensus decision-making, benefits and challenges to it. You get better decisions by involving more people, typically, because you get a range of views and you're able to get everybody bought in. However, it can also promote groupthink. You get better implementation by creating as much value as possible. You look for what we call the greatest value objective. However, decisions might be sub-optimized in order to avoid conflict. People go for the lowest common denominator. You get better trust by fostering transparent engagement, but it could lead to a compromised decision with important concerns unaddressed, which of course means that people will come back and try to revisit that decision. You are potentially equalizing the distribution of power in a group because of that inclusivity and the need to have everybody at least somewhat aligned. The challenge is that people without requisite expertise could divert focus from what's most relevant. Everybody feels they have to weigh in, whether they have the right expertise for the decision at hand or not. And then finally, a benefit of consensus decision-making is that it creates shared understanding through discussion that bridges differences. But on the other hand, it's time-consuming and it can be tedious to reach consensus. But really, if you're practicing and trying to develop operational excellence, that means active leadership of the decision-making process. Indeed, we believe and we've been told that what stakeholders value the most about what an alliance manager brings to the table and the services that they provide is the orchestration of the decision-making process. So you want to make sure you brainstorm the greatest value objective for the decision. What is it that's going to create the most value for the partners, for the patients, for your customers in making this specific decision? And if you have lots of various opinions, you can use a voting or a ranking methodology to find a majority perspective. You want to specifically frame the opportunity or problem statement and ensure that decision makers have all the relevant data. Actively manage divergent opinions. You want those out there, but organize issues, tackle them one at a time, and avoid the kind of free-for-alls from unfacilitated discussion. Keep your focus on the greatest value objective. Don't sub-optimize unless that objective is deemed unachievable and a new greatest value objective is specifically agreed. Now, there really is a process to managing consensus decision-making. Sometimes folks think that it's just going to happen organically through discussion, but if you really want to structure the decision-making process so it's as efficient and effective as possible, that level of operational excellence, there's a process to follow. Start with that greatest value objective, get that with folks understanding, yes, this is what we would like to achieve, and frame the decision. What's the concise opportunity or problem statement that you need to really come up with a proposal to address, right? And in this diagram, anything that's in brown, you're going to consult your internal governance for. You don't want to get to a stage where the alliance has made a decision, but yet you take it internally and it doesn't get endorsed and the decision gets overturned. You want to work iteratively with your team and with your internal governance to make sure that you're getting support. So with the decision framed and what you're trying to achieve, agreed to develop a proposal collaboratively. And then test, is there consensus? If yes, then go and implement the decision, and make sure that you've defined key assumptions to monitor, validate, or invalidate the decision. If there isn't consensus, then you want to make sure you get the issues out on the table. Identify interests or concerns that are not addressed that could wind up undermining that greatest value objective. And then modify your proposal and look again to see if there's consensus. If yes, great. If not, then either you try to get people to go along with the decision, to not block it, or if they are going to block and you're not able to really come to a decision, then typically what's happening is that the status quo is maintained. But obviously this is an iterative process that you want to move through until you get to the point where you do have a good consensus that creates as much value as possible for all concerned. Now, one of the things that we see in this hybrid environment is where we can make things visible. It's much easier to really have everybody on the same page. And one of the tools that you can use when you've got either something internally or a complex decision with the partner, and there's no right answer or competing interests, is you can use a virtual whiteboard, such as Jamboard, which we're going to use in a few minutes, as a tool to lay things out visually and to let people participate in gaining alignment. So you start when you've got multiple paths forward, just depicting them on a continuum. And then give everybody an avatar and have them position it where their view aligns on the continuum, and have each person explain their rationale for their position. Then give everybody an opportunity to relocate their avatar. Once you do that, have the outliers, person 3 and person 5 here, explain why the arguments in support of the other positions didn't sway them. Have somebody in the plurality, those that are over here by solution 1, have them address the outliers' concerns. What can they offer that might satisfy their concerns? And then reposition your avatars again. And then if consensus isn't apparent, identify the key assumptions required to be true for the selected idea solution to be the correct choice. Ask the outlier if they're willing to go along with the plurality, as long as the key assumptions aren't proven false. And here you get a consensus that people can live with and can move forward on.